Hello, dear friends. It's Carly, and welcome to another episode of the I Learned podcast. Welcome. Welcome to this space that we all have access to. We all share it together, and it truly is a safe space for not only for me to be able to speak my truth, but for you to explore your own truth in this space where no one is judging, no one is criticizing, there's only support, there's only understanding. I know for me, not that I'm perfect at this, but there's only practicing unconditional love. I feel like that's at the basis of who I really am, is unconditionally loving, and that is really what this space is all about for me, is taking a second to let myself rest in this space where I'm totally safe and I'm unconditionally loved. So I mean, this is one of the places that I come for me to be able to feel that way. I hope that somewhere in your life that, that you have a space that's like that. And if not, this podcast is here. And there's more beyond this podcast. If you're interested in what I'm talking about and you like this vibe that I got going on, you're among friends. And there are others. I was celebrating because we got one new listener last week. Yay! And at this point, I think that puts us up to four listeners total, even though some of my more recent episodes, they have 7 or 8 listens. So I know there's some other people in the mix. But 4 people who are taking in this content regularly, which I gotta think means that you guys resonate, which I think is like the coolest thing ever, that I get to just speak my truth and like radiate my authentic vibe, and the people who are cool with it show up and hang out. And that seems like a party, at least a party I want to be at, which normally is not the case. Not much of a partier, more of a party for 1, maybe 2 at home kind of guy, But yeah, I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that anybody's here. Like, it still is somewhat surreal that this thing that feels so good and so like gas tank filling for me to get to do this, to hear that others are finding it helpful or resonating or whatever, or even the fact that they just show up and listen. I mean, in today's day and age where we have infinite options as far as how we spend every waking moment of our day, I am literally honored, like beyond words, honored that I make the cut. That I was listening to an interview yesterday that Oprah did of Esther, which was really cool. Because Oprah definitely forced Esther to like get back to like the bare basics of what she's talking about. And so, yeah, it was a really good conversation, and unrelated really to the main conversation. At one point, Oprah said, when I realized I'd been given the opportunity to speak in homes across the nation every day, which, I mean, they're at the height of what she was doing. She did have millions of viewers every day, 5 days a week. She had the opportunity to speak to people in their homes. And to me, this podcast is basically like that. Like, you're giving me the opportunity to enter into your reality, your awareness, and seriously, I'm honored. So I thank you. I thank you for being here. I don't have a pointed message in my mind, but I know something always comes through. Today and yesterday have been just like really, really satisfying. Like, so many highlights, so many cool things, manifesting new connections and reconnecting with old friends, and manifesting some money, and on and on and on. And I think, oh boy, Okay. Um, so I think the coolest thing uh, that I manifested yesterday and today were two conversations with two different people about the same thing. And this is another one of those topics that I think a lot about, and I go through it on my inner world, and it hasn't yet come out on this podcast because it falls into that category of like, this is freaking huge. How do I even begin to tell this story, to communicate this, in this case, this visualization that I've created, or more like I received it. It just kind of downloaded, like popped into my head as like a complete package of understanding. So I don't think I really created it. I think I allowed it to come to me. So this way of looking at it or visualizing the process, um, and it just I feel like really only people who resonate with what I'm saying are going to be able to hear me through this story, especially because it's about existing at this deeply emotional place. This, like, what I call it is like under the sea, like the sea of emotions that's limitless. And um, emotions are messages that are emanating from our soul. So, like, really, our soul is under the emotions. So, like, if you swim through the emotions down into the depths, you find your soul. And a lot of people don't take that journey because there's things when you go into the water, when you get into your emotions, and when you start descending down into your own depths, there are things there. There are unhealed wounds, there are past traumas, there are past lifetimes of past traumas. There are all kinds of things that exist within our emotional realm. And that's why most people don't ever get in the water, because it takes a special set of skills to be able to navigate that space with any kind of proficiency or productivity. Most people, it just drives them crazy to have to go into their emotions, and they just work to get out as fast as they can. And I've known my whole life that I'm not really like that. I like it in there. I like it in that deep, quiet place. When I talk to people, I want to have a deep conversation. I'm not ever satisfied with surface level small talk. It just makes me want to beat my head against the wall. I don't exist well on the surface, and I've always known that I'm in the depths. I like it down there, and that's kind of where I belong. Um, and this is where we get to the part of like, how do you even bring this all together? I guess, like, here's where I got the final epiphany, the final piece that clicked into place for me to be able to put all this together was Dolores Cannon's material. And if you aren't familiar, she is she passed a few years ago. She was a hypnotist, and she developed QHHT, which you might have heard of. She is who created that and then trained like something like 2,000 QHHT practitioners in the last like 40 years of her life. And during those last like several decades, she did past life regressions on tons, thousands, however many people. And then she also gave speeches and she wrote books. She has a ton of books, tons and tons of books. And yeah, she talks about a lot of things. And so through these past life regressions that she did, or regressions really, because sometimes like the person landed in between lifetimes. So like that's where she got her material. I think I did reference her book, Between Death and Life. She talks about the process that happens in between lifetimes. But anyway, so she's who I got this last piece from, because she talks about the old earth and the new earth, and that basically there's this like shift in consciousness that is unfolding where our frequency is getting high enough that we're jumping to the new earth from the old earth, and that this process has been unfolding for several decades. And that to make this shift possible, there are these three waves of volunteers. There are the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave. And the first wave came, I don't have the dates in front of me, but these people are like into their 70s by now. And basically, they were born into a world that was not really like soul friendly. It wasn't really spirituality friendly as like a whole. It was very taboo, very like very new age. This was like before new age. This is when these people were born. These people made the movement that has let so many of us step so easily into our spiritual path. So that was the first wave. They are truly trailblazers. The second wave, this is my mom's generation, and as they talked about the second wave of volunteers, I'm like, she is absolutely one. Basically, they just have like a really harmonizing presence. Their job is to just flow energy, and that they have a very calming presence on basically anyone that they're around. But because they are so sensitive, they really usually dislike people and end up just like holed up in their houses the whole time instead of out mixing with others, doing what their soul came to do. But, you know, my mom stays home, but she sees my brothers and my dad and my grandma and like lots of people within her realm, her loved ones. And so I have no doubt that she's doing what she came here to do in her small circle. And then there's the third wave of volunteers. And this is where I resonate as far as being a third waver. These are the ones that came to like really show us something, because they have this beautiful platform where, you know, the first wave of volunteers came and like broke ground on this space, this spiritual community that is now like out in the open, and like nobody bats an eye at spirituality or channeling or mediumship or whatever. Like those things are just basically generally accepted, at least in the United States where I live. So that's good. And that is like so much thanks to the first wave of volunteers who brought these topics more readily into the conversation. So yeah, that just like that concept alone, I absolutely love it. But anyways, so the new earth, she talks about like what it's like on the new earth. She describes how it's different from the old earth. And because it is like it's a higher frequency, and we know that that ties back to emotion, like it means it feels better there. And as she talks about the new earth, I recognized it, and I was like, wow, I know I've been there. I know, I mean, I feel what she's talking about. And the way that I've come to understand it is like we kind of pop back and forth between the old earth and the new earth without even realizing it. Like when you feel really good and you look out at the world and it's like the trees are sparkling, they're so beautiful, and like the sunsets are just ridiculous, and like everything is in flow and people are kind and they smile and your life is happy and in flow. Like that is basically my understanding of the new earth. And the old earth is a lower vibration, meaning people are not nearly as nice. The weather is not good. Your timing is not nearly as good. Like there's frustration there. There's like any of those lower vibrations or like bad feeling things that exists in this space of the old earth. And so I think like as our emotions fluctuate, we actually flip back and forth between these two places. But what and this is like taking that concept of there being a new earth and coupling it with like everything that I've been understanding about my own depth and like trying to understand. It just like all of a sudden clarified that, and basically the two conversations, the one today especially, like really helped me like clarify how I can explain this. And basically it's like, okay, so if we have this sea of emotions, at the very bottom of this sea of emotions is our soul. And in the bottom of our soul is a gateway. And if you go through that gateway, you get to the new earth. And my theory, it's more than a theory because I basically identify as living this way at this point, is if you figure out how to get to the gateway, you can go through at any time. So, like every morning, like every time you think about it, like every time you're aware, then you go through the gateway and you get to the new earth where your timing's better, where you're living from what your soul desires most and why your soul came into physical reality and all of the cooperative components that are necessary to help you bring your soul's purpose to life. It all exists and is in flow and is unfolding perfectly in the new earth. And that's happening all the time, whether you're there or not. And so this gateway and learning how to go through it and learning how to get there and all of that is really just in service of being able to get to the new earth where your soul's purpose is already unfolding. You just have to step into it. And that's literally what it feels like to go through this gateway. And basically all it means, the gateway will take you through it if you can get next to it, if you can get to that depth. And getting to that depth is really a matter of, continuing with the analogy, it's a matter of your diving skills. And basically your diving skills are your self-love, your ability to self-soothe, your ability to self-heal, your own ability to care for and nurture and sustain yourself. And it's those skills that help you face those depths as you descend further and further and further until you get to the very base of your soul. And once you get there, it's almost like a gravitational pull. The gateway just takes you through. So like, it's not a matter of like, how do I actually physically move through the gateway? It's more a matter of how do I get deep enough that it can take me across to the new world? And so what we're talking about here is actually facing ourselves, going inward and spending time with ourselves and getting really comfortable being alone and in our own company, being really fond of our own company. As I was telling this story, I think yesterday, it's like for so long, I was basically running from myself because I didn't like myself. I figured out later. But because of that, anytime I was just like alone with my thoughts, like my thoughts weren't very nice to me. They didn't say very nice things to me. They didn't think very nice things about me. Just really mean to me. I was. So I didn't spend a whole lot of time alone. I was either sleeping or I was with someone, with people, with, I was at school or I was at work or I was with my boyfriend or I was with my, my friend or whatever. And I spent a lot of years that way. And, probably not coincidentally, those were also the depressed years. Those were the years where I suffered from really bad anxiety. I didn't indulge in any kind of self-care because I didn't want to face myself. I was scared of what was in there because it just hurt. It was just painful to be in there. So I just didn't go there. And eventually, we figure out, like, I think Brene Brown probably cracked me open to this concept, but basically that like the birthplace of joy is our own vulnerability. And that when we numb the painful emotions, we're also numbing the good ones. And the only place to get to joy is to go in through all the shit that we've collected and just not dealt with and shoved down and stuffed and pretended that we're okay when we're not. All that stuff is waiting in either the emotional sea or in the soul itself, because sometimes like that stuff that's really bubbling up is coming from past lifetimes. Like there's so much processing to go through. And, the process to get to this depth, I mean, it took me, time's not really a factor. You can get there as fast as you can get there. But I'm going to say it took me like 5 years from starting my consistent daily self-care and like spending time by myself on purpose, even though I didn't really like it. Now it's like my favorite thing, my alone time. Um, but from the time I started like deliberately spending time alone to when I feel like for the first time I was deep enough to get taken by the gateway into the new earth experience. Um, I mean, I was gonna say 5 years, but now that I'm thinking about it, like I do think that it was happening intermittently as I went along. There were things that, I mean, that definitely had moments of feeling like the new earth, but maybe that 5 year mark is more where like I feel like I'm consistently over there. Like the repeatability of it, of like getting down there and going through the gateway and living in the new earth side of things, living at that high frequency. Um, yeah, that's that's a skill. That's a skill that I think I learned. And I think I can teach others. I think that part is a theory. It's definitely not a theory that it exists because I've been there, but helping others to get there is really where this all originated, back at the beginning of this year when I very first conceived of the gateway. Um, my identity along with the gateway came with it, and basically I self-identified at that point as a mermaid. Uh, Basically, as I understand it from the download, was like this gateway is like a bridge between two places. And that my role is to help people who are in the vicinity of the bridge and who want to cross the bridge to assist them in finding their way through, in, getting across the finish line of where they're trying to reach for. And basically, I live at the bridge. I live at the gateway. I live in this like super deep place where most of the time, like 98% of the time, I'm alone. And I've gotten to where, like, I've learned how to enjoy my own company, which basically is a result of liking myself more. The more I liked myself, the more I liked my alone time, which it makes sense because when you don't like yourself, you're going to put up with a lot from other people just so you don't have to be alone. And when you like yourself, you're willing to be alone. So you no longer have to put up with bullshit from other people. You're like, just go on because I'm more than happy to be alone. So there's so much self-empowerment in enjoying your alone time, but that's a talk for another day. But yeah, it's a somewhat isolated place to live, and yet I think I was built for it. I was built to live at the bottom of this ocean. And I'm not so much a diving instructor. I can't really teach you, beyond what I've said of like, you got to face your shit. Like, I can't face it for you. I can't even really teach you any more than that. But there are people, and this is what's becoming clear to me these last 2 days of having this same conversation with two different people. There are people finding this freaking gateway and I'm hanging out at it, and now we're like having a conversation and they're down there, and so I'm a guide for this space, and anyone who finds themselves at that depth, I am there and I am ready to greet you and help try to answer questions. And I'm a little information post right there next to this bridge between the old earth and the new earth, between you living in your human programming and you living in the new earth doing what your soul came forward to do. Like those two things are kind of synonymous. And really, like, trust me, I hear it when I'm like the new earth and the gateway and, all of these things, it starts to sound a little cultish. It's all a visualization for frequency, for our vibration, which just is a fancy way of understanding our emotions. Like basically what we're talking about is feeling really, really good. And really, we only have access to those highest level emotions when we're willing to face our darkest shit. And that's really the point of the gateway, is that, you know, really the main thing I can't do is come to the surface and bring this opportunity to the people at the surface, because the gateway only exists on the bottom of going through all your emotions, doing all of that inner work. Every time you come up with something that hurts and that's hard, swim back to the surface if that's what you need to. Close the book, walk away, come back to it later, and bring all the energy and reinforcements that you can for loving yourself through that process. Because when you truly have access to the tool of self-love, healing gets so much easier, and there's really no depth of healing that you can't face. If you can love yourself through it, if you truly love yourself in like a source unconditional way, then healing just, it's a joy to rendezvous with. It's a joy to get to process and release old things that no longer serve us, and to get to lighten our load and swim a little bit deeper, because that's, I've said a couple times on this podcast, new levels, new devils. And that's a perfect example of, if you're diving, you're swimming down, and you come to something that hurts, you come to something that's fucking painful, and okay, I've had enough of that, and you go back to the surface. Well, at that point, you only got as deep as that thing that you hit it hurts, and you went back to the surface. You weren't able to swim all the way down to the bottom. And so swimming to the bottom is a matter of like, okay, yes, that thing hurts, so go take a break. But then you have to come back and you have to face that thing and love yourself through it such that it's able to heal. And all that lets you do is go to the next level, to swim a little bit deeper, and then there's something else, and then there's something else, and there's something else. That's why, not to say that it has to take 5 years. For some people, I don't think they ever get there. The analogy I was using with my parents is like, it's like they're not even getting in the water. When I say my parents just don't know how to know me, they don't even swim. They don't even snorkel, let alone dive, let alone get to the bottom of the ocean and find this fucking magical gateway to the new earth. Like, they don't have any idea what I'm talking about, because they don't even get in the water. So there's a piece of that is also something that I've really had to learn, because I was avoiding who I was overly dependent on other people. And I like to be in the depths. I like to have deep conversations. And the way I call it now is like, I would drown them. I would, take them with me and focus them into the depths with me, because that's where I wanted to be. And I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to go in there alone. I want you to come with me. I want us to have this conversation, but like, they're not built to go in there. Only I am. And so I had that effect on people where I would drown them, and basically I'm exposing them to more of their soul shit than they're ready to face. And their own not wanting to face it gets projected on them not wanting to spend time with me anymore. And so that was a cycle that I had to work out. And really the getting good at being alone and getting good at my alone time helped work the kinks out of that. Because what I found was like, if I just do what feels natural to me, if I just like, build my little shanty down here at the bottom of the sea next to this bridge, and I just set up shop because that's what I want to do, then I've been down here for quite a while and am loving it. This is absolutely where I want to be. And then all of a sudden, like, here comes people. It's not like a gigantic rush of like a whole stadium full of people. It's like one person. And then a while later, a second person. But like, oh my God, they're not drowning. They're walking around down here like I am. And they found their way down here because they've faced their shit. They've done that work. And I'm not having to like coax them off the shore to even try to get them in the water. I'm accepting that I belong down here at this depth. I am a mermaid and I am meant to live under the ocean. And anybody who comes down here and crosses my path, I will welcome them with open arms and an open heart. And I will guide them the best that I can to offer myself of service. How can I help you in your space right here in this depth where most people don't ever show up? And yesterday I got to have the conversation to explain this visualization. And then today again, I got to have the conversation to explain this visualization. And it just felt like, okay, today's the day. Like, it's time to try to begin to explain this because, it feels so big, but I think that's the gist of it. I think, you know, I basically am built like a fish. Like, I breathe underwater. I breathe in the deepest parts of the ocean, and I'm built to survive there. And that's why for so long, as I'm denying myself and my emotions and my soul, I'm not ever going into the water. I'm not ever diving and swimming down to that depth. I don't go there. And those were the depressed years. Those were the anxious years. Those were the years where I wanted to kill myself because I'm like, what the fuck is the point of my life? Well, it's really hard to find the point of your life when you don't try to merge with your soul. So it's part of the process. Like, if you want to know what your soul wants, then you have to go inward and you have to listen to yourself. Like seeking teachers and seeking other people who can give you like a recipe for success. Like, that's great. And that can, help open some options and open your perspective and teach you some strategies that you can take on your dives. You can take inward to look at your things in a different light. But ultimately, like, we have to make that dive for ourselves. And uh, it feels like so good to understand that, like, my soul came to hang out in this space, to swim around like a mermaid and help people cross this gateway, help people cross this bridge, and to be able to talk about it and to put it into words and to help. I hate to say like help sell it because it really doesn't need to be sold, like most of us can feel our soul's call all by itself. You don't need me to tell you that there's something down there that wants your attention. But like when you've dove down to that depth, there are people down there. It's a very isolated process and can be a lonely journey. And so it's easy to think that, like, to do this, you're just going to be alone forever and ever and ever. And that's really not how it is. Like, you're alone on the dive, probably for the most part. But uh, once you get down there and once you get to the new earth side, there's all these other people who are doing it too. We all have to walk our own path to get there, but we meet and we align in this place where we're living from what our soul truly wants. I keep saying this, it's like a natural vetting of who we come into contact with, because when you're living in the new earth, when you're living from this place of like doing what your soul came to do, you're really only rendezvousing with other people who are living from that place of living what their soul came here to live. So it just, all of life, the whole thing, every single facet of life gets better when we do this inner work and we dip down into aligning with the deepest parts of our soul, and we let the gateway take us into this new earth of allowing and honoring what our soul is calling for, what our soul wants. It's making requests of us every day. And in the new earth, we don't even really have to think about it. We just live from those impulses, those soul level impulses, on a daily basis. And the sweetest, most beautiful, sparkly life that you can ever imagine is what's unfolding over there in the new earth. And it's ready for you to step into it anytime you're ready. So there's all of that. So it feels really good to get that into the conversation, because it's very much the basis for so much of what has happened this year, what's unfolded in my life this year, my understanding of like my soul's purpose to like live at this bridge and help people cross it. It sounds so simple, and yet it's so fulfilling to understand that that's where I fit. That's where I fit into this big picture of things. Um, yeah, yeah, feels really, really good, have to say. So I took a second just there and let my mind settle on the basis of what I'm talking about in this visualization, this dive into ourselves. And I think the most common name for that practice is shadow work. That's what shadow work is facing your shadows, facing what's in there, what's unhealed that really probably needs to be healed. Not that we ever have to do anything, but when we do the work of processing our shit and healing our old wounds, we do feel better. It can be really, really painful and really hard to face that stuff, but in the end of applying our tools and applying our self-love and applying our knowledge that the universe has our back and that everything is always working out, and we shift our perspective on those old things, those old pains and old wounds, and we move those things into a place where it fits. It maybe you're not like grateful that it happened, but you can see the good that came out of it, and you can wrap your mind around, okay, that's why I needed to go through that. To me, that's what my healing looks like, is being able to say, like, I can see why I went through that. I can see why I needed to live that experience for what came next, or for, setting up this foundation of what my soul wants to do in my life. Certain experiences were required for that. And even the painful ones set me up perfectly to get to live the bliss of like truly what my soul wanted. When it said, like, I have a reason for existing, so I'm going to get to manifesting myself a vessel. Like, okay, so I'm going to, sign this soul contract with my parents, and I'm going to get born, and I'm going to grow up and do a whole childhood and get myself in position to do what I'm coming to do. And for such a long time, that was like such a mystery to me. Like, what was I coming to do? And I was coming to live in this place, this deep place where there's not a ton of other people hanging out down here, but the ones that are down here, like, they appreciate me being here. And I appreciate them being here. It's so cool to see another person after all this time. Yeah, that shadow work, it keeps a lot of people out of the pool. It keeps a lot of people out of the water. But it is so freaking worth it if you can get your skills, your shadow work skills, right? Like your self-love, your self-compassion, your ability to say when enough is enough, like when you need a minute, when you need to get out of the water and walk away from it for a little bit, like that's absolutely part of it sometimes. And then go get someone, if that's how you roll, if you can like talk to somebody who can help you do what we said of like shifting your perspective on it and trying to find the good in it. Or if it's just you that goes back and, a lot of times what happens, like when I get my shadows stirred up is, I might journal about it like right then, and there's only so much I can see. And then as I relax and I go about my life, the next day, a couple days later, I'll get an epiphany or an insight will just click in my mind and it'll make more sense. So sometimes like it's like that, like we don't even necessarily have to like on purpose do every single step of shadow work. Sometimes the answer comes through when we're actually in a relaxed, happy place. So yeah, it's like that. It's a process of shadow work and diving into ourselves. And what is waiting for us on the other side can only be described as soul level fulfillment. Yeah, not to oversell it. That's like underselling it. I don't think there are even words that can fully describe like how satisfying and how badass it is to like go about your life in the new earth. It's delightful, sparkly and delightful. One of the things that I am celebrating these last couple days is I booked my second ever extended engagement coaching package. So my coaching package is made up of 4 90-minute Zoom sessions, and those 4 sessions take place every 2 weeks. So it takes a couple months to do those 4 sessions. And the goal is this. The goal is turning inward and diving as deep as we can, 90 minutes at a time. And then those 2 weeks in between sessions, that's for processing. That's for working back through whatever we faced when we turn and dive into who you really are. Basically acting as a guide for that process. And my main tool that I use for those sessions is the natal chart. And some people really like the natal chart itself, and they want to learn the actual astrology and learn the planets and the signs and all of that. And I am more than happy, more than capable of teaching the natal chart itself. But if you're somebody that's like, I don't really care about all that, but I would like to have conversations and dive into some of these things, I would also do where I can pull your natal chart and I can use that to try to understand you better, and we can still have conversations that don't necessarily center around astrology and the natal chart itself. So I'm definitely open to either of those. And if you're interested in seeing rates for that option, you can email me at owningauthenticity@gmail.com. And I also just offer like a free consultation call if you want to chat and see if booking that extended engagement together is right for you at this time. So yeah, booking that second one yesterday reminded me that I wanted to share that option as well. If you're liking this podcast and you want to work with me one-on-one, that option is available. So there's that. I feel pretty good about this. Like I said, I feel really good that we got the gateway and mermaids and this dive and the water analogy and drowning people. It sounds so violent. That we got all this into the conversation. And I'm sure, I am 100% positive that this will continue to serve as a foundation, that we will continue to have more conversations that add to this. But now we have this building block in our conversation to use however is helpful. So once again, fellow travelers, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this, for being here, for bringing your energy and contributing to this safe space that we all share together. And it's hard. It's so hard. I mean, I write pages and pages and pages in my journal about how grateful I am that even one person listens to these and finds it helpful, finds it resonant. So grateful for each and every one of you. And if there's ever anything that I can do for you or answer any questions, also feel free to email me at owningauthenticity@gmail.com. Until next time, dear friends, you take good care, and so will I.